Clara Whitfield's fingers clawed at the dirt, dragging her broken body inch by inch toward the boardwalk. Blood dripped from her split lip onto the Texas dust. 3 feet away, a woman's shoes, polished, proper, stepped backward and disappeared into a doorway. "Please," Clara whispered. "Somebody." The street stayed empty. The good people of Dusty Hollow had seen enough. Then hoofbeats. A shadow fell across her face, and a voice, rough as gravel, quiet as a promise. "Easy now, ma'am. I've got you." This is their story. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this tale travels. The summer of 1875 would be remembered in Dusty Hollow for 2 things: the drought that cracked the earth like old leather, and the day Clara Whitfield learned exactly what she was worth to the people she'd called neighbors. She stepped out of Hollis's general store with her bundle: flour, salt, a small measure of coffee she'd allowed herself as a luxury, and felt the August heat slam into her like a physical force. Sweat already gathered at the base of her neck, dampening the collar of her faded blue dress. 3 months she'd lived in this town. 3 months of washing other people's clothes until her hands cracked and bled. 3 months of keeping her head down, her voice soft, her expectations lower than the dirt beneath her worn boots. It hadn't been enough. "There she is!" Clara's blood went cold. She knew that voice, had been dreading it for 2 weeks, ever since the night behind the saloon, when Garrett Hollis had cornered her, whiskey on his breath, his hands grabbing at her dress. She'd slapped him, hard, in front of his friends. Now she was going to pay for it. "Mr. Hollis." She turned slowly, her arms tightening around her bundle. "I don't want any trouble." Garrett stood on the steps of his father's store, his handsome face twisted with something ugly. Behind him, 2 men she recognized, ranch hands from the McCarty spread, men who laughed too loud and drank too much, and looked at women like they were calculating prices. Trouble? Garrett descended the steps, his boots deliberate on the wood. "You're the one who made trouble, Clara. You're the one who stole from my father's register." "That's a lie." Her voice came out steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I paid for everything. Your father counted the coins himself." "My father's old. His eyes ain't what they used to be," Garrett smiled, and Clara felt sick. "But I saw you clear as day. Saw you slip that money right into your pocket." "I didn't." "You calling me a liar?" Clara looked past him, desperate, searching for help. Mrs. Patterson stood in the doorway of the dress shop. Tom Wheeler leaned against the post outside the saloon. Deputy Morrison sat on a bench not 20 feet away, picking at his fingernails. None of them moved. None of them would. "I paid," Clara said again, quieter now. "You know I paid." "What I know," Garrett stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the pomade in his hair, "is that you should have been nicer to me when you had the chance. Should have shown some gratitude when a man like me took an interest in a widow woman with nothing to her name." Clara's chin lifted. It was a mistake. She knew it even as she did it, but something in her refused to cower. Not again. Not anymore. "A man like you," she said, "isn't worth a woman's gratitude." The backhand caught her across the face before she could flinch. The blow spun her sideways. Her bundle flew from her arms, flour exploding in a white cloud, coffee beans scattering across the dirt like dark tears. Clara stumbled, caught herself on a hitching post, tasted blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her cheek. "You uppity little—" Garrett, one of the ranch hands, the bigger one, stepped forward with an eager grin. "Let me help you teach her some manners." What happened next would live in Clara's nightmares for years to come. She tried to run, made it 3 steps before hands grabbed her arms, yanked her backward. A fist drove into her stomach, doubling her over. She couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. couldn't do anything but try to curl into herself as the blows rained down. A boot to her ribs. Pain exploded through her chest, sharp and bright. Another kick, this one to her back. She heard something crack, felt it, and the world went white. "Not so proud now, are you?" Garrett's voice came from somewhere above her. "Not so quick with that sharp tongue." Clara's face pressed into the dirt. She could taste it, gritty and metallic with her own blood. Through the roaring in her ears, she heard laughter, male laughter, cruel and satisfied. And underneath it, the silence. The terrible, damning silence of people watching and doing nothing. She could see them. Through the haze of pain, she could see Mrs. Patterson's polished shoes retreating into her shop. Could see Tom Wheeler turning his back, walking away. Could see Deputy Morrison finally standing up, not to help, but to drift toward the saloon, where he wouldn't have to witness what he couldn't be bothered to stop. Another boot connected with her shoulder. Clara cried out, the sound torn from her throat before she could stop it. "That's enough now, boys," Sheriff Wade's voice. Clara felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. "You've made your point. Let her be." "She's a thief, Sheriff." Garrett was breathing hard. "Needs to understand." "She understands." The sheriff's tone was weary, not angry. Bored, almost. "Any more, and you'll have to answer for it. Even a woman like her don't deserve to die in the street." A woman like her. The words cut deeper than any fist. Clara heard boots retreating, heard the crowd dispersing, heard the town of Dusty Hollow return to its ordinary business, stepping around her broken body like she was nothing more than a dead animal in the road. She lay there, every breath a knife in her chest, and tried to move. Her right arm responded sluggishly. Her left hung limp, something wrong in her shoulder that sent lightning bolts of agony through her whenever she shifted. "Get up," she told herself. "Get up, get up, get up." But her body had stopped listening. The sun beat down on her, merciless. Blood pooled beneath her face, mixing with the scattered flour and the red Texas dust. Clara felt consciousness starting to slip away, darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. "This is how I die," she thought. Beaten in the street like a dog, forgotten before the blood even dries. She'd survived so much. Her mother's death, her father's accident, 5 years of a loveless marriage to a man who'd needed a housekeeper more than a wife. William's grave, freshly dug, and the creditors circling like vultures before the dirt had even settled. She'd come to Dusty Hollow to start over, to build something new from the ashes of everything she'd lost. And now she was going to die 20 feet from a general store, surrounded by people who couldn't be bothered to help. Clara's eyes drifted closed. "Let go," something whispered inside her. "Just let go. It'll be easier that way." And maybe she would have. Maybe that's where Clara Whitfield's story would have ended. In the dirt, alone, forgotten. But then she heard it. Hoofbeats, steady and rhythmic, growing closer. The sound stopped. Leather creaked, a saddle settling. Boots hit the ground. Jesus Christ! A man's voice, rough and low, carrying an accent that spoke of somewhere north of Texas. What in God's name happened here? Clara tried to open her eyes, but they wouldn't cooperate. She felt movement beside her, felt the sun's glare blocked by something, someone, crouching down. "Easy now, ma'am." That voice again, closer now. "Don't try to move. Let me look at you first." Hands touched her. Large hands, calloused and careful, moving over her body with practiced efficiency. Checking for breaks, assessing damage. Clara wanted to tell him to stop, to leave her alone, to save himself before Garrett and his friends decided to come back. But her voice had abandoned her, along with everything else. "Ribs broken," the stranger muttered. "Shoulders out. Cuts, bruises. Hell, they worked you over good." A pause, heavy with something Clara couldn't identify. "Who did this to you?" She managed to crack her eyes open, just barely, and found herself looking into eyes the color of storm clouds, gray and turbulent, carrying lightning in their depths. Eyes that had seen violence, delivered it, survived it. Eyes that looked at her not with pity, but with something else entirely. Recognition. The recognition of one broken thing seeing another. "Don't," Clara whispered, the words scraping past her split lips. "Don't what?" "Don't ask. Don't get involved. They'll what?" The quiet in his voice was more dangerous than any shout. "Tell me their names." "Please." She tried to shake her head, regretted it immediately as the world spun. "Just leave me. Not your problem." The stranger was silent for a long moment. Clara watched emotions move behind those gray eyes. Anger, grief, something old and painful that she recognized without understanding. "Once," he said slowly, "I rode past someone who needed help. Told myself somebody else would stop. Somebody else would handle it." His jaw tightened. "By the time I came back, it was too late." "What happened to them?" "They died. Flat. Final. Because I didn't stop." He stood, and Clara heard a sound she'd recognize anywhere. The distinctive whisper of a revolver sliding from its holster. "Hey!" The stranger's voice rang out across the empty street, sharp as a gunshot. "The men who did this. I know you're watching. I know you're close by, feeling real proud of yourselves for beating on a woman half your size." Silence from the town. "I'm giving you one chance." He turned slowly, his gun hand steady. "One chance to come out here and face someone who can fight back." More silence. Clara could see curtains twitching, doors cracking open just wide enough for curious eyes. But no one emerged. No one stepped forward. "That's what I thought." Contempt dripped from every word. "Cowards, every last one of you." He holstered his weapon and returned to Clara's side. This time, when he crouched down, there was a gentleness in his expression that made her chest ache for reasons that had nothing to do with her broken ribs. "I'm going to pick you up now," he said. "It's going to hurt. I'm sorry for that, but I can't leave you lying here like this." "You don't even know me." "I know enough." He slid one arm beneath her knees, another behind her shoulders. "I know you didn't deserve this, and I know nobody else in this godforsaken town is going to help you." He lifted her, and the pain was extraordinary, white-hot and blinding. Clara couldn't help the cry that escaped her, couldn't stop the tears that spilled down her bruised cheeks. But through it all, she was aware of how carefully he held her, how he adjusted his grip to cause her the least possible hurt, how his arms remained steady even as he navigated the step onto the boardwalk. "Doc!" he called out. "I need a doctor!" A door opened. An older man appeared. Wire-rimmed spectacles and shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. His eyes went wide at the sight of Clara. "Good Lord! What?" "3 men beat her," the stranger cut in. "In broad daylight, in the middle of your main street. Where can I put her?" "This way. Back room." Clara felt herself being carried through a doorway into blessed coolness and dimness. The smell of carbolic and medicine filled her nose. She was lowered onto something soft, a cot maybe, and for a moment she let herself believe she might actually survive this. "I'll need to examine her properly." The doctor was already moving, gathering instruments. "You'll have to wait outside." "Like hell I will." "Sir, this is a medical examination, and those men are still out there." The stranger's voice dropped to something cold and certain. I'm not leaving her unprotected. A pause. Then, fine, but stay out of my way. Clara felt a hand close around hers, rough, warm, solid in a way nothing had been solid for a very long time. I'll be right here, the stranger said. And though he was speaking to the doctor, Clara knew the words were meant for her. Nobody's going to hurt you again. I give you my word on that. She wanted to tell him that words were worthless, that promises meant nothing, that he should just leave while he still could. But she was so tired, and the pain was so enormous, and there was something in his voice, some fundamental quality of steadiness that made her want to believe him. So instead of protesting, she squeezed his hand with what little strength she had left. The pressure was returned, firm, reassuring. "What's your name?" Clara whispered. "Silas." A pause. "Silas Morrow." "Clara. Clara Whitfield." "Well, Clara Whitfield?" Something shifted in those storm-gray eyes. "Looks like our paths crossed for a reason. And I don't intend to ride away until I know you're safe." The doctor moved closer, instruments in hand, and Silas finally released her hand and stepped back. But he didn't leave the room, didn't take his eyes off the door. And for the first time since she'd fallen in the street, Clara felt something crack open in her chest. Not hope. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, the possibility of it. Outside the doctor's office, the afternoon sun continued its slow arc across the Texas sky. In the saloon, men drank and pretended they'd seen nothing. In the general store, Horace Hollis counted his money and didn't ask his son why his knuckles were split. In the sheriff's office, Wade Morrison filled out paperwork and told himself it wasn't his business. And in the shadows behind the livery stable, Garrett Hollis watched the stranger's horse, a rangy buckskin tied to the post outside Doc Price's surgery, and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Fear. Because he'd seen the way that man moved, seen the easy way his hand dropped to his gun, seen the cold certainty in those gray eyes. That wasn't a store clerk or a farmer or a traveling salesman. That was a killer. And Garrett had just made himself his enemy. "We got a problem," he said to the two men standing behind him. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that carries a Colt like he was born with it." Garrett spat in the dirt. "Find out who he is, where he came from, and what it'll take to make him go away." "And if he won't go?" Garrett's handsome face twisted into something ugly. "Then we make him." 3 days passed before Clara could stand without the world tilting sideways. Doc Price had done his work well. Shoulder reset, ribs wrapped tight, cuts cleaned and bandaged. But the healing was slow, and every breath still reminded her of Garrett Hollis's boots. What surprised her more than the pain was Silas Morrow. He hadn't left. Not once in 3 days. He slept in a chair outside her door, ate his meals standing up, and kept one hand near his gun at all times. When she asked why, he just shrugged and said, "Told you I'd stay until you were safe." "I'm safe now," Clara said on the third morning, sitting up carefully in the cot. "Doc's got me patched up. You can go." Silas leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Go where?" "Wherever you were headed before you found me bleeding in the street." "Nowhere particular." He studied her with those storm-gray eyes. "Got a ranch about 15 miles north. Nobody waiting for me there. No reason to rush back to an empty house." Something in his voice made Clara look at him more carefully. "Empty?" Silas's jaw tightened. Just slightly, but she caught it. "Used to not be," he said quietly. "That was a long time ago." Clara recognized that tone. She'd heard it in her own voice often enough. The sound of someone talking around a wound that hadn't healed. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. Wasn't your doing." The door opened, and Doc Price bustled in, breaking the moment. "Good, you're awake. Let me check those ribs." Silas stepped out without being asked, and Clara heard his boots on the wooden floor, pacing. Always pacing. Like a man who couldn't sit still with his own thoughts.
"He's been here the whole time?" Clara asked as the doctor examined her.
"Every minute." Doc Price's voice was neutral, but his eyebrows rose slightly. "Don't know what you did to earn that kind of loyalty from a stranger, Mrs. Whitfield, but I'd say you're fortunate."
"I didn't do anything. He just stopped."
"Most men don't," the doctor straightened, satisfied with her progress. "Most men would have ridden right past, told themselves it wasn't their business."
"Why didn't he?"
Doc Price looked toward the door, then back at Clara. "That's a question you'd have to ask him, but I'd wager the answer isn't a happy one." Clara thought about that as the doctor finished his examination. Thought about the way Silas had said, "By the time I came back, it was too late." Thought about the emptiness he'd mentioned. Everyone carried ghosts. She knew that better than most. Maybe that's why he'd stopped. Maybe he recognized a fellow haunted soul. "You're healing well," Doc Price announced.
"Another week of rest, and you should be able to move around normally. Though I'd recommend staying out of Garrett Hollis's way for, well, permanently, if possible. Hard to do in a town this small." "Which brings me to my next point," the doctor lowered his voice. "Mr. Morrow has offered to take you to his ranch, let you recover there, away from complications." Clara's heart stuttered. "He what?" "Said he's got room. Said you could work off your keep once you're healed, if your pride requires it." Doc Price smiled slightly. His words, not mine. "I barely know him." "You barely knew anyone in this town, and look how that turned out." The doctor's smile faded. "Mrs. Whitfield, I've lived in Dusty Hollow for 30 years. I know what kind of place it is. I know what kind of man Garrett Hollis is becoming. If you stay here, what happened 3 days ago will happen again. Maybe worse." Clara stared at her hands, bruised, scraped, still shaking slightly. The doctor was right. She knew he was right. But leaving with a stranger? Trusting a man she'd met while lying in her own blood? "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But don't think too long. Garrett's not the patient type, and his father's influence only goes so far." The doctor left, and Clara sat alone with her thoughts. Through the thin walls, she could hear Silas talking to someone. Mrs. Price, probably. The doctor's wife who'd been bringing Clara soup and clean bandages. His voice was low, respectful. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was gentle. Not the voice of a man who meant harm. But then again, William had seemed gentle too. Right up until she'd realized that his gentleness was just indifference wearing a polite mask. The door opened. Silas stood there, hat in his hands, looking almost nervous. "Doc told you," he said. It wasn't a question. "He told me. I'm not trying to... I don't want you to think..." Silas stopped, frustrated with himself. "Hell, I'm no good at this." Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. "At what?" "At explaining myself." He stepped into the room, staying near the door like he was ready to bolt. "Look, I've got a house. It's not fancy, but it's got 4 walls and a roof, and nobody's going to bother you there. You can stay until you're healed, earn your keep if that's what you want, and then go wherever you please. No strings, no expectations." "Why?" "Why what?" "Why do you care what happens to me?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough.
Because 3 years ago, I wasn't there when someone needed me. And they died because of it. He met her eyes, and Clara saw something raw in his expression. I can't change that. Can't bring them back. But I can make damn sure I don't let it happen again. Not if I can help it. Clara felt her throat tighten. Who did you lose? My wife. The words came out like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep. My children. A boy and a girl. The air left Clara's lungs. She'd suspected loss, had seen it in his eyes. But not this. Not a whole family. Gone. Silas. You don't have to say anything. He put his hat back on, like he was armoring himself. Just think about my offer. You've got time to decide. He turned to leave. Yes. Silas stopped, turned back. Yes? He repeated. I'll come with you. Clara's voice was stronger than she expected. Not because I'm scared of Garrett Hollis, though I am, but because... She hesitated, searching for honest words. Because you stopped. When nobody else did, you stopped. That means something. Something shifted in Silas's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. We'll leave at first light, he said. Doc says you can ride if we take it slow. I can ride. I figured. This time he did smile, just barely. You're tougher than you look, Clara Whitfield. I've had practice. Silas nodded, once, and left her alone with a strange new feeling blooming in her chest. It wasn't hope, not exactly, but it was something. They left Dusty Hollow before dawn, while the town still slept. Clara sat in a wagon Silas had borrowed from the livery, her body protesting every bump in the road, but her spirit lighter than it had been in months, maybe years. You didn't have to do this, she said as they passed the last buildings of town. The wagon, I mean. I could have ridden. Could have, Silas agreed. But there's no point in proving how tough you are when you've got broken ribs. Save the heroics for when they matter. Clara huffed out a breath that was almost a laugh. Speaking from experience? More than I'd like. Silas kept his eyes on the road ahead. Spent too many years thinking I had to do everything the hard way. Took losing everything to teach me there's no shame in accepting help. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clop of hooves. Clara found herself studying Silas's profile. The strong jaw, the slight frown that seemed to be his resting expression. The way his hands held the reins with easy competence. Can I ask you something? She said. Depends on what it is. Your family. How did they... She stopped. I'm sorry, that's too personal. It's all right. Silas's voice was steady, but Clara saw his knuckles whiten on the reins. I was a Texas Ranger. 8 years hunting outlaws. Tracking men nobody else could find. Made a name for myself. Made enemies, too. He paused, and Clara waited. There was a man named Ezra Blackwood. Ran a criminal empire from here to New Mexico. I got close to catching him. Closer than anyone had before. So he sent a message. Clara's stomach dropped. Your family. While I was chasing him across the territory, his men came to my ranch. Silas's voice had gone flat, empty. They killed Hannah, Daniel, and Lily. Burned the house with them inside. Oh, God! Clara pressed her hand to her mouth. Silas, I'm so sorry. I quit the Rangers that day. Couldn't stomach working for justice when justice had failed me so completely. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Rebuilt the house on the same foundation. Thought maybe if I could fix that, I could fix myself. Didn't work. Why do you stay there, if it hurts so much? Because leaving feels like giving up on them. Silas finally looked at her, and Clara saw the weight of 3 years of grief in his eyes. Because every morning I wake up in that house, I remember what I lost. And remembering hurts, but forgetting would be worse. Clara understood that. Understood it in her bones. My husband died of fever, she said quietly. 2 years ago. It wasn't a love match. I married him because I had nowhere else to go. And he married me because he needed someone to cook and clean. But I was his wife for 5 years. I cared for him when he was sick. I buried him when he died.
And then? Then his creditors came, took the house, the land, everything. Left me with nothing but the clothes on my back and a whole lot of debt that wasn't mine. Silas shook his head slowly. World's not kind to women alone. No, it's not. Clara looked out at the passing landscape. Brown grass, scrub brush, endless sky. That's why I came to Dusty Hollow. Fresh start, new beginning. Thought if I worked hard enough, kept my head down, things would get better. Did they? Clara touched her bruised cheek. What do you think? Silas was quiet for a moment. Then, well, you're not in Dusty Hollow anymore, and you won't have to keep your head down at my place. Nobody there to judge you or hurt you. Just you. Just me. He glanced at her sideways. And I promise you, Clara, I'm not going to hurt you. Not ever. Whatever else happens, you can count on that. Clara believed him. That was the strange thing. After everything she'd been through, all the ways men had disappointed her, she believed this one. Maybe that made her a fool. Maybe hope always made fools of people. But sitting in that wagon, watching the sun climb over the Texas hills, Clara decided she didn't care. She was alive. She was free of Dusty Hollow. And she was heading somewhere new, with a man who'd stopped when no one else would. For now, that was enough. The ranch appeared as the sun reached its peak, a small valley between two rises of land, sheltered from the worst of the wind, but still open to the sky. Clara's first thought was that it looked lonely. Her second thought was that lonely might not be so bad. The house sat in the center of the property, a single-story structure of rough-hewn logs with a covered porch wrapped around 2 sides. Behind it, a barn that needed painting. 3 horses in a corral, watching their approach with curious eyes. "It's not much," Silas said, and Clara heard that apologetic note in his voice again. "Place got away from me these past few years." "It's perfect." Silas looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "It's falling apart." "It's standing." Clara smiled despite the pain in her ribs. "That's more than I can say for most things in my life right now." Something flickered across Silas's face. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude. He pulled the wagon up to the house and set the brake. "I'll show you to your room, then you rest. Doctor's orders." "I could help." "You could fall over and undo all of Doc Price's good work." Silas climbed down and came around to her side, reaching up. "Come on, let me help you." Clara hesitated, then took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, careful. He lifted her from the wagon like she weighed nothing, setting her gently on her feet. For a moment, they stood there, her hand still in his. "Thank you," Clara said quietly, "for all of this. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Don't worry about that." Silas released her hand, stepped back. "Just focus on healing. Everything else can wait." He led her inside, and Clara got her first look at what 3 years of grief looked like when it lived in a house. Dust everywhere. A rocking chair covered with a sheet. A photograph on the mantel that Silas's eyes skated past without landing on. Everything neat, everything in its place, but nothing lived in. Like a museum of someone's old life. "Your room's through here."
Silas pushed open a door to reveal a small space with a bed, a window, and not much else. "It's not fancy, but—" "Stop apologizing." Clara turned to face him. "I've slept on floors, Silas. I've slept in barns. This is fine. Better than fine." He nodded, looking uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I'll let you rest. Holler if you need anything." "Silas," he paused in the doorway. "Why is there a sheet over that rocking chair?" The question hung in the air. Clara watched his shoulders tense, watched him fight some internal battle. "Hannah used to sit there," he finally said. "After the kids were in bed. She'd rock and mend clothes and tell me about her day." His voice cracked, just slightly. "I covered it because I couldn't stand looking at it empty." Clara felt her heart twist. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked." "No." Silas turned back, and his eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "It's been 3 years. Maybe it's time I stopped covering things up." He walked to the rocking chair and pulled the sheet away. Dust motes swirled in the afternoon light. For a long moment, he just stood there, looking at the chair where his wife used to sit. Then he folded the sheet, set it aside, and turned back to Clara. "Get some rest," he said, his voice rough. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." He left, and Clara heard his boots on the porch, heard the door open and close as he went outside. Probably to tend the horses. Probably to be alone with his ghosts. She understood that too. Clara made her way to the small bedroom and lowered herself carefully onto the bed. The mattress was thin but clean, the pillow soft. Through the window, she could see Silas walking toward the barn, his shoulders bent like he was carrying something heavy. We're both carrying things, she thought. Both haunted. Both broken. But maybe that's why this works. Clara closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under, and for the first time in months, she slept without nightmares. She woke to the smell of cooking. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling was wrong. The sounds were wrong. Everything was wrong. Then memory crashed back, and Clara sat up too fast, hissing at the pain in her ribs. "Easy." Silas's voice came from the doorway. "Supper's ready when you are. No rush." Clara pressed a hand to her chest, waiting for her heart to slow. "What time is it?" "Past sundown. You slept most of the day." He didn't sound bothered by that. Your body needed it. She got up slowly, making her way to the main room. Silas had set the table. 2 places, 2 plates, 2 cups. On the stove, something bubbled that smelled surprisingly good. "You cook?" Clara asked, surprised. "Enough to survive." Silas ladled stew into bowls. "My wife used to, well, someone had to learn after." They sat across from each other, eating in a silence that felt less awkward than Clara expected. The stew was simple: beans, salt pork, vegetables. But it was hot and filling, and she was hungrier than she'd realized. "This is good," she said. "It's adequate." But Silas looked pleased. "Hannah would have said it needs more salt." "Hannah sounds like she knew what she was doing in a kitchen." "She did." Silas set down his spoon. "She was good at everything. Cooking, sewing, keeping the books. Made this house feel like a home instead of just walls and a roof." Clara heard the longing in his voice and chose her next words carefully. "Tell me about her." Silas went still. "Why?" "Because you want to. I can see it." Clara met his eyes. "And because the only way out of grief is through it. Believe me, I know." For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he started talking. "I met Hannah in Austin. Her brother was a ranger, got shot up pretty bad, and she came to take care of him.
First time I saw her, I thought she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She was smart, funny, didn't take any of my nonsense. We were married 6 months later. Fast. When you know, you know. Silas pushed food around his plate. Daniel came along the next year. Then Lily. We built this place, built a life. I thought I had it all figured out. What was Daniel like? Curious. Always asking questions. Always getting into things he shouldn't. Silas's voice softened. He wanted to be a ranger like his daddy. Used to wear my old hat around the house, practicing his swagger. Clara smiled. And Lily? Sweet, quiet, loved animals more than people. His eyes grew distant. She had this way of looking at you, like she could see right through to your soul. Hannah used to say she'd either be a preacher or a horse whisperer. They sound wonderful. They were. Silas's voice cracked. They were everything. And I let them down. I was off chasing Ezra Blackwood, so damn sure I was doing something important. And while I was gone, he couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Clara reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Silas looked at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what human contact felt like. It wasn't your fault, Clara said quietly. You were doing your job, trying to protect people. I should have protected them. His voice was raw. They were my family, my responsibility, and I failed them. You didn't fail them. The men who killed them failed them. Ezra Blackwood failed them. Clara squeezed his hand. Don't carry guilt that belongs to someone else. Silas looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he turned his hand over and intertwined his fingers with hers. How do you do that? He asked. Do what? Say exactly what I need to hear. Clara smiled, just barely. Practice. I spent 5 years married to a man who couldn't talk about anything that mattered. Learn to read between the lines. They sat there in the lamplight, hands joined across the table. Two broken people finding unexpected comfort in each other's company. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Storm coming, Silas said, but he didn't move to release her hand. Seems like there's always a storm coming. True enough. He finally let go, stood to clear the dishes. You should get more rest. Tomorrow I'll show you around the place, if you're up for it. I'd like that. Clara helped with the dishes, despite his protests, moving carefully around the small kitchen. Their shoulders brushed as they worked, and neither pulled away. When the last plate was dried and put away, Silas walked her to her bedroom door. Thank you, Clara said. For dinner, for talking, for everything. Thank you for listening. Silas hesitated, then added quietly. It's been a long time since I talked about them out loud. Felt good. Painful, but good. That's how healing works. Painful, but good. He nodded, stepped back. Good night, Clara. Good night, Silas. She closed the door and leaned against it, pressing her hand to her chest where her heart was beating too fast. This was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous. Letting herself feel something for this man. Letting herself hope. That's how people got hurt. But lying in bed that night, listening to the storm rage outside and feeling safer than she had in years, Clara decided she didn't care about danger. She'd already survived the worst. Whatever came next, she'd survive that too. And maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to survive it alone. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Clara healed slowly but steadily, her ribs knitting back together, her bruises fading from purple to yellow to nothing at all. As her strength returned, She started taking on more work around the house, cooking meals that actually had flavor, cleaning rooms that hadn't seen a proper scrubbing in years, coaxing life back into the neglected kitchen garden. Silas watched her transform his house into something that almost resembled a home, and tried not to think about how much he liked having her there. "You don't have to do all this," he said one evening, coming in from the barn to find fresh bread on the table and curtains washed and hanging in the windows. "I know I don't have to." Clara wiped flour from her hands. "I want to. It gives me purpose." Most people's idea of purpose doesn't involve scrubbing 3 years of dust out of corners. Most people aren't trying to repay a debt they can't put a price on. Silas frowned. "Clara, I told you. I know what you told me." She met his eyes steadily. "But I need this, Silas. I need to feel useful. I need to feel like I'm earning my place here, not just taking charity." He couldn't argue with that. He understood pride, had enough of his own to recognize it in someone else. "Fine," he said, "but you overdo it, and I'm putting you back on bed rest." Clara smiled, and Silas felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been locked away for 3 years, creaking open. "Deal," she said. 2 weeks after Clara arrived at the ranch, Silas made a decision. "I want to teach you to shoot," he announced over breakfast. Clara looked up from her eggs. "I know how to shoot." "You know how to shoot squirrels. I want to teach you to shoot men." "That's a disturbing way to start the morning." "It's a disturbing world." Silas pushed his plate aside. "Garrett Hollis isn't going to forget what happened. Men like him, they nurse their grudges. And if he ever comes out here, you'll be here to protect me." "What if I'm not?" Silas's voice was sharp. "What if I'm out checking fence lines, or in town for supplies, or—" He stopped, jaw tight. "I can't be everywhere, Clara, and I can't lose someone else because I wasn't there when they needed me." Clara set down her fork slowly. "Is that what this is about? Hannah?" "This is about keeping you alive." "This is about your guilt." Clara's voice was gentle but firm. "You're trying to make up for something that wasn't your fault by controlling something you can." Silas opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. Of course she was right. "Maybe," he admitted, "but that doesn't make the danger less real. Garrett Hollis hurt you once. He'll try again if he gets the chance." "Then teach me." Clara stood, her chin lifting in that stubborn way he was beginning to recognize. "Not because you're scared, because I should know how to defend myself, because I'm tired of being helpless." That Silas understood completely. "All right," he said. "Let's start today." They spent the afternoon in the field behind the barn, Clara learning to hold a rifle properly, to sight down the barrel, to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling it. She was a quick study. By sunset, she could hit a target at 30 yards more often than not. "You've done this before," Silas said, impressed despite himself. "My father taught me. Said a woman should know how to feed herself." Clara lowered the rifle, massaging her shoulder. "Never thought I'd be learning to shoot at people." "Let's hope you never have to." Clara looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. "But if I do?" "Then you aim for center mass and don't hesitate." Silas took the rifle from her. "Hesitation gets you killed." Speaking from experience? Too much of it. They walked back to the house in the gathering dusk, their shoulders brushing occasionally. Silas found himself hyper-aware of her presence, the way she moved, the sound of her breathing, the faint scent of soap and flour that seemed to follow her everywhere. He hadn't felt this aware of another person in 3 years. Hadn't wanted to. But Clara Whitfield was making him want things he'd told himself were buried with Hannah. That scared him, more than any gunfight
ever had. The storm broke a week later. Not weather, but something worse. Silas was in the barn, mending tack, when he heard hoofbeats approaching. Multiple horses, riding fast. He was out the door with his rifle before the riders crested the hill. 3 men. He recognized one of them, Virgil Cobb, the ranch hand who'd helped Garrett beat Clara. The other 2 were strangers, but they had the look of hired muscle. "That's far enough," Silas called out, rifle raised. The riders stopped. Virgil leaned forward in his saddle, grinning. "Well, well, the hero himself." His eyes flicked toward the house. "She in there? The Whitfield woman?" "What do you want?" "Got a message from Mr. Hollis, the younger one." Virgil's grin widened. "He says what's his is his, and he doesn't take kindly the strangers interfering. Clara Whitfield doesn't belong to anyone." "That's not how Garrett sees it." Silas felt his finger tighten on the trigger. "Get off my land."
Or what? You'll shoot 3 men in cold blood? Virgil laughed. That'd make you a murderer, friend. Even the law out here doesn't look kindly on that.
"I'm not your friend." Silas's voice went cold. "And I've killed men before who threatened what was mine. Don't think I won't do it again." Something in his tone made Virgil's smile falter. The man studied Silas with new wariness. "Who are you?" Virgil asked. "We asked around. Nobody knows you. Nobody's ever heard of Silas Morrow." "Maybe I'm nobody, or maybe I'm somebody who doesn't want to be found." Silas stepped forward, and all 3 horses shied nervously. "Either way, you're going to turn around and ride back to Dusty Hollow. You're going to tell Garrett Hollis that if he or any of his men come within 5 miles of this ranch again, I'll put them in the ground." "Big talk for one man." "I've been one man against worse odds than you 3. Silas smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Care to test me?" For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Virgil shook his head, jerking his horse around. "This ain't over," he spat. "Yes, it is." Silas watched them ride away, waiting until they were out of sight before lowering his rifle. Behind him, the door to the house opened. Clara stood on the porch, her face pale. "Silas?" "Get inside." "What did they want?" "Get inside, Clara. Now." She went, and Silas followed, his mind already racing. Garrett wasn't going to give up. Men like him never did, not when their pride was wounded. Which meant this was only the beginning. Inside, Clara was waiting by the table, her arms wrapped around herself. "They came because of me," she said. "They came because Garrett Hollis is a coward who can't accept being told no." Silas set his rifle down. "This isn't your fault." "If I hadn't come here, then you'd be dead in Dusty Hollow." Silas turned to face her. "Or worse. Don't second-guess yourself, Clara. You made the right choice." "Did I?" Her voice cracked. "Because right now, it feels like I just brought my problems to your doorstep." Silas crossed to her, putting his hands on her shoulders. She flinched, then relaxed into his touch. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "I chose to help you. I chose to bring you here. Whatever comes next, I'll face it. We'll face it together." "Why?" Clara looked up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" Silas didn't have an answer. Or rather, he did, but he wasn't ready to say it out loud. Instead, he pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. For herself, for them, for whatever was coming. And in that moment, holding this woman who'd stumbled into his life and cracked open something he thought was closed forever, Silas made a silent promise. Whatever Garrett Hollis threw at them, whatever darkness was coming, Clara Whitfield would survive it, even if he had to burn the world down to make sure of it. The peace lasted exactly 19 days. Clara counted them later, looking back. 19 days of healing. 19 days of learning the rhythm of the ranch. The sound of Silas's boots on the porch. The way he took his coffee black and strong. 19 days of something that felt dangerously close to happiness. Then the riders came. Not Garrett's men this time. Something worse. Clara was in the kitchen when she heard the hoofbeats. 3 horses, maybe 4, moving with the steady purpose of men who knew exactly where they were going. Silas. She kept her voice calm, but her hand was already reaching for the rifle he'd taught her to keep by the door. He was beside her in an instant, his own weapon drawn. Get to the back room. Don't come out unless I call for you. Like hell. Clara, we face things together. You said that. Silas's jaw tightened, but there was no time to argue. The riders were already pulling up in front of the house. Clara moved to the window and felt her blood turn to ice. 4 men, hard faces, trail-worn clothes, guns worn low on their hips. The one in front was older than the others, maybe 50, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw and the easy posture of someone who'd killed before and would do it again without losing sleep. But it wasn't the scarred man who made Silas's hand shake on his rifle. It was the man beside him. Tall, lean, dark hair going silver at the temples, dressed like a gentleman despite the dust on his boots. No! Silas's voice came out strangled. No, no, no! You know them? Get in the back room. Now! Silas, who are they? He turned to her, and Clara had never seen such fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself. Fear for her. That's Ezra Blackwood. The name hit Clara like a physical blow. Ezra Blackwood. The man who'd murdered Silas's family. The man who'd burned his wife and children alive. Oh, God. Clara, please. Silas gripped her arm. Please, I can't watch you die too. Please, get in the back room. She wanted to argue, wanted to stand beside him the way she'd promised, but the desperation in his voice broke something in her. I'll be right behind that door, she said, with my rifle, and if things go bad, they won't. If they do, I'm coming out shooting. Silas nodded once, then released her. Clara retreated to the bedroom, leaving the door cracked just enough to see and hear. Silas stepped onto the porch. Well, well. The scarred man's voice carried clearly. Silas Walker. Been a long time. It's morrow now. Silas's voice was flat. And not long enough, Dutch. Dutch. Clara remembered that name from Silas's stories. Ezra Blackwood's right-hand man. Name don't matter. Dutch leaned forward in his saddle. Man's the same underneath. What do you want? Now is that any way to greet old acquaintances? This voice was different, smoother, cultured. Clara shifted slightly to see Ezra Blackwood dismounting, brushing dust from his coat like he was arriving at a social call, rather than the home of a man whose family he'd destroyed. I'm going to ask one more time. Silas's hand rested on his gun. What do you want? Blackwood smiled. It was the most unsettling expression Clara had ever seen. I want to talk, Mr. Morrow. Just talk. Surely we can be civilized about this. Civilized. Silas laughed, harsh and ugly. You murdered my wife. You burned my children alive. And you want to be civilized? That was business. Regrettable, but necessary. Blackwood spread his hands. You were getting too close, making too much noise. I had to send a message. Clara saw Silas's whole body go rigid, saw his finger twitch toward the trigger. The message was received, Silas said through clenched teeth.
I stopped chasing you. I disappeared. So why are you here? Because I need something, and you're the only man who can help me get it. I'd sooner help a rattlesnake. Hear me out. Blackwood took a step closer, seemingly unconcerned by the gun pointed at his chest. There's a shipment, gold, from the Territorial Bank in Santa Fe. It was being transported to Austin when it went missing. Not my problem. It could be your solution. Blackwood's voice dropped. You help me find it. Track it the way only you can, and I'll make it worth your while. Enough money to disappear forever. Enough to start over somewhere nobody's ever heard of Silas Walker, or Silas Morrow, or whatever name you want to call yourself. And if I refuse? Blackwood's smile widened. I've heard you've taken in a woman, a widow from that little town south of here. His eyes flicked toward the house. It would be a shame if something happened to her. Clara felt her heart stop. You touch her, Silas said, his voice dropping to something barely human, and I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. I will find you, and I will make you beg for death before I give it to you. Strong words from a man who couldn't protect his own family. Silas moved so fast, Clara barely saw it. One moment he was standing on the porch. The next, he had Blackwood by the throat, his gun pressed against the man's temple. Dutch and the other two riders went for their weapons, but Blackwood raised a hand, stopping them. Easy, gentlemen. Mr. Morrow and I are just having a conversation. Give me one reason not to pull this trigger. Silas's voice shook with rage. One reason. Because if you kill me here, my men will kill you. And then they'll go inside and find that woman you're protecting. Blackwood's voice stayed calm, despite the gun at his head. I may die, but she'll die too. Is that what you want? Another woman's blood on your hands? Clara saw Silas's hand tremble, saw the war being fought behind his eyes. Let me go, Blackwood said quietly. Let me go, and think about my offer. I'll give you 3 days to decide. Help me find the gold, and I'll leave you both in peace. Refuse, and... He shrugged. Well, you know what I'm capable of. For a long, terrible moment, Clara thought Silas was going to shoot anyway. Thought he was going to choose revenge over survival. Then, slowly, he released Blackwood and stepped back. 3 days, Silas said, and then you get your answer. I look forward to it. Blackwood straightened his collar, as casual as if nothing had happened. Oh, and Silas, don't think about running. I've got men watching the roads. If you try to leave, I'll know. He mounted his horse and nodded to Dutch. The 4 riders turned and headed back the way they'd come. Clara counted to 60 before she emerged from the bedroom. Silas stood on the porch, his gun still in his hand, staring at nothing. Silas? He didn't respond. Silas, talk to me. I should have killed him. His voice was hollow. Should have put a bullet in his brain and ended it. Then you'd be dead, and so would I. At least he'd be dead too. Clara moved to stand beside him, close enough to touch, but not quite touching. Is that really what you want? To die for revenge? I don't know what I want anymore. Silas finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was almost too much to bear. I spent 3 years trying to forget, trying to move on, and now he's here, standing on my porch, threatening... His voice cracked. Threatening you. What are you going to do? I don't know. Are you going to help him? No. That came out firm, certain. Never. I don't care what he offers. I won't help that monster. Then what? Silas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, harder. We need help. Real help. There's a marshal in Red Mesa. Good man. Fair. If I can get word to him, get him to bring a posse. Blackwood said he's watching the roads. Then we don't take the roads. Silas turned to face her fully. There's a trail through the hills. Rough going, but it comes out near the main road to Red Mesa. If I leave before dawn, we leave before dawn. Clara, don't. She held up her hand. Don't tell me to stay behind. Don't tell me it's too dangerous. I'm not sitting here alone, waiting to find out if you're alive or dead. If Blackwood's men catch us, then we face them together. Clara grabbed his shirt, forcing him to meet her eyes. I'm tired of being the one who gets left behind. I'm tired of being helpless. You taught me to shoot. You taught me to ride. Let me use what you taught me. Silas stared at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite acceptance, but close. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. I prefer determined. Despite everything, Silas almost smiled. Fine, we leave at 4. Pack light. Only what we can carry on horseback. And if Blackwood's men find us? Then we make them regret it. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Silas checked their weapons, loaded extra ammunition, made sure the horses were fed and rested. Clara packed what food she could carry, filled canteens, tried not to think about what tomorrow might bring. As the sun began to set, she found Silas standing in front of the photograph on the mantel. Hannah and the children, frozen forever in happier times. I used to talk to them, he said without turning around. Every night. Told them about my day, what I was working on, what I was thinking. Stupid, I know. It's not stupid. I stopped after you came. He finally turned to face her. Didn't feel right anymore. Talking to the dead when there was someone living right here. Clara's throat tightened. Silas. I'm not saying this right. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. What I mean is, you've changed things. Changed me. And I don't know if that's good or bad. But I know I'm not the same man I was 2 months ago. Is that what you want? To be different? I want... He stopped, struggling for words. I want to stop surviving and start living. I want to stop covering up rocking chairs and closing doors and pretending the past doesn't exist. I want... His voice dropped. I want to feel something besides guilt and anger and grief. Do you? Feel something else? Silas crossed the room in 3 steps and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry and full of everything he couldn't say. Clara grabbed his shirt and kissed him back, pouring all her own fear and hope and longing into it. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I'm sorry, Silas said. I shouldn't have... Don't apologize. Clara's hand was still fisted in his shirt. Don't you dare apologize. This is bad timing. The worst possible... I don't care about timing. She pulled him back down, kissed him again, softer this time, but no less intense. I don't care about anything except this. Us. Right now. Clara. His forehead rested against hers. If something happens tomorrow, then at least we'll have had tonight. She led him to the bedroom, and Silas followed willingly. Whatever came with the dawn, they had this. They had each other. For now, that had to be enough. Clara woke in the darkness before dawn, Silas's arm heavy across her waist. For a moment, she just lay there, memorizing the feel of him beside her. The warmth of his body. The steady rhythm of his breathing. The way his hand curved protectively over her hip, even in sleep. Then reality crashed back, and she carefully disentangled herself to dress. Silas was awake the moment she moved. What time is it? Almost 4. He was out of bed and dressing in seconds, all business now. Whatever had passed between them last night,
was tucked away somewhere safe, saved for a time when survival wasn't the priority. They saddled the horses in silence, moving with practiced efficiency. Clara took Rosie, the steady bay mare who'd carried her from Dusty Hollow. Silas mounted Dust, his rangy buckskin, rifle already in hand. "Stay close," he whispered. "Follow my lead. And if I tell you to run—" "I know." Clara checked her own rifle. "But you'd better keep up." They slipped away from the ranch as the first gray light touched the eastern sky. The trail Silas had mentioned was less a trail and more a suggestion, a narrow path through rocky hills that no sane person would call a road. Clara understood immediately why Blackwood's men wouldn't be watching it. You'd have to know it existed to find it. They rode in tense silence, every sound magnified in the pre-dawn stillness. An owl called somewhere in the darkness. A coyote answered. Clara's heart pounded so loud she was sure Silas could hear it. An hour passed. 2. The sun rose, casting long shadows across the rough terrain. Clara's legs ached from gripping Rosie's sides. Her shoulders burned from tension she couldn't release. "Almost there," Silas said quietly. "Another mile and we hit the main road. From there, it's straight shot to—" He stopped mid-sentence. "What?" Clara whispered. Then she heard it too. Hoofbeats. Coming fast from behind them. "Damn!" Silas spurred Dust forward. "Ride! Now!" Clara didn't need to be told twice. She kicked Rosie into a gallop, the mare surging forward with surprising speed despite the rough terrain. Behind them, the hoofbeats grew louder. Closer. "There!" a shout from their pursuers. "I see them!" Gunfire cracked through the morning air. Clara felt something whiz past her ear and ducked lower over Rosie's neck. "Keep going!" Silas had fallen back, positioning himself between her and the shooters. His rifle barked once, twice. A cry of pain from behind them. The trail widened slightly, and Clara risked the glance back. 3 riders, 2 still coming hard, 1 fallen. Silas was reloading as he rode, his movements fast and sure. "The main road!" Clara could see it now, a brown ribbon cutting through the grassland below. "We're almost—" A bullet caught Rosie in the hind quarter. The mare screamed and stumbled. Clara felt herself flying, the world spinning, the ground rushing up. She hit hard, rolling, the breath driven from her lungs. Her rifle went skittering across the rocks. "Clara!" Silas's voice, distant and frantic. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only lie there gasping as hoofbeats thundered closer. A shadow fell across her face. One of Blackwood's men, dismounting, grinning down at her. "Well, well, the boss'll be happy to see you." He reached for her. A gunshot. The man's head snapped back and he crumpled. Silas was there, hauling her to her feet, his arm around her waist. "Can you walk?"
Yes."
Her legs were shaking, but they held.
"Rosie."
"We'll come back for her. Right now, we need to move." He half carried her toward his horse, but more riders were coming. Clara could hear them, could see the dust cloud rising from the trail behind them.
"There's too many," she gasped. "We can't outrun them."
"Then we don't run." Silas pulled her toward a cluster of boulders just off the trail. "We fight." They scrambled into the rocks, finding cover just as 4 more riders crested the hill. Clara grabbed her fallen rifle, checked that it was still functional, and took position beside Silas. "How many rounds do you have?"
14.
He was reloading his own weapon with steady hands.
"You?"
10.
"Make every shot count."
The riders spread out, surrounding their position. Clara recognized Dutch among them, barking orders. "Morrow, give it up. You're outnumbered and outgunned." "Maybe," Silas called back. But I've got cover, and you don't. How many of your men are you willing to lose? Silence. Clara could almost hear Dutch calculating.
Mr. Blackwood just wants to talk.
He can talk to my rifle. More silence. Then Dutch's voice again, lower. Fine. Have it your way. Boys, light 'em up. Gunfire erupted from all directions. Clara pressed herself against the rock as bullets chipped stone inches from her face. She saw movement to her left, swung her rifle, fired. A man dropped. Silas was a blur beside her, firing, reloading, firing again. His face was set in grim concentration. They're trying to flank us. Clara spotted 2 men moving around to their right. Silas pivoted, took out one. Clara got the other.
Good shooting.
I had a good teacher. More gunfire. Clara felt a bullet graze her arm, hot and sharp. She ignored the pain, kept shooting. Time lost meaning. There was only the next target, the next shot, the next breath. Her rifle grew hot in her hands. Then, suddenly, a new sound. Horses. Many horses. Coming from the direction of the main road. Throw down your weapons! A commanding voice, unfamiliar but authoritative. This is Marshal Thomas Burke. You're all under arrest. Clara risked a look and felt her heart soar. A dozen men on horseback, badges glinting in the morning sun. The marshal rode at their head, a grizzled man with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Blackwood's men were already surrendering, dropping their guns, raising their hands. Dutch cursed viciously, but followed suit. Silas sagged against the boulder, his rifle dropping to his side. Thank God. How did they know? Clara was shaking now, the aftermath of adrenaline. How did they find us? I don't... Silas stopped, understanding dawning. Doc Price. I sent word to him before we left Dusty Hollow. Told him if anything happened to me to contact the marshal in Red Mesa. You planned this? I hoped for it. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were wet. I didn't want to tell you, in case it didn't work. Clara punched him in the shoulder. Ow! That's for keeping secrets. She grabbed his shirt and kissed him hard. And that's for keeping me alive. Marshal Burke rode up to their position, surveying the scene with raised eyebrows. Silas Morrow? Yes, sir. I've heard of you. Former ranger, right? Tracked Ezra Blackwood for 2 years before... The marshal's expression softened. Well, before. Yes, sir. I've been looking for Blackwood myself. Never could pin him down. Burke's jaw tightened. Now you're telling me he's operating in my territory? He's got a camp about 40 miles northwest. Devil's Canyon. Silas stood, wincing. 12 to 20 men, well armed. He's looking for a gold shipment that went missing from Santa Fe. Burke's eyes sharpened. That shipment. We've been tracking it too. He glanced at his men. Looks like we've got work to do. Marshal, Silas stepped forward. I want to come with you. Silas, no! Clara grabbed his arm. You've done enough. I need to see this through. He looked at her, and she saw the ghosts behind his eyes. For Hannah, for Daniel and Lily. I need to see him face justice. Justice or revenge? Justice. Silas covered her hand with his. I promise. I won't become what he is. Marshal Burke was watching their exchange with interest. Ma'am, you're welcome to come too. We could use another rifle. Clara looked at Silas, looked at the marshal and his men, looked back the way they'd come, toward the ranch and the life she'd started building. I'm coming, she said. Silas started to protest. Don't, Clara squeezed his hand. Together, remember? He closed his eyes, breathed deep. When he opened them again, there was something like peace in his expression.
Together, he agreed. Marshal Burke nodded approvingly. All right then, let's go get Ezra Blackwood. They rode hard for Devil's Canyon, 15 strong. Clara's arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed her, but she'd wrapped it tight and refused to fall behind. Silas kept glancing at her every few minutes, worry etched in the lines around his eyes. I'm fine, she said for the third time. You're bleeding. I've bled before. Keep your eyes on the trail. Marshal Burke rode up beside them, his weathered face grim. We'll reach the canyon by nightfall. My scouts say Blackwood's got about 15 men left, after the ones we captured this morning. 15 against 15, Silas said. Even odds. Not quite even. Burke's jaw tightened. They've got the high ground. Canyon's a natural fortress. One way in, steep walls on both sides. If they see us coming, they'll cut us down before we get close. That's about the size of it. Clara listened to this exchange with growing dread. So, what's the plan? Burke and Silas shared a look. Something passed between them, some understanding Clara couldn't quite read. There's another way, Silas said slowly. A trail along the canyon rim. Dangerous as hell, but it exists. I found it years ago when I was tracking Blackwood the first time. You never mentioned that before. Never had reason to. Silas's expression darkened. I was planning to use it when, well, before everything happened. Clara understood. Before his family died. Before revenge became impossible. If we split up, Burke said, working through the strategy, half approaching from the front to draw their attention, half coming down from above. It could work, Silas nodded. I'll take the rim trail. I know the route. I'm coming with you, Clara said immediately. Clara, don't, she cut him off. Don't tell me to stay behind. Don't tell me it's too dangerous. We've had this conversation. This is different. This is exactly the same. Clara grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. You go up that trail, I go with you. That's not negotiable. Silas stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. What? Clara demanded. Nothing, just... He shook his head. Hannah would have said the exact same thing, word for word. Clara didn't know how to respond to that. Didn't know if it was a compliment or something more complicated. All right, Silas said finally. We go together. They made camp a few miles from the canyon as the sun began to set. No fires, too risky. Cold food, quiet voices, everyone checking their weapons one last time. Clara sat apart from the others, reloading her rifle by feel, when Silas settled beside her. How's the arm? Still attached? That's not what I asked. Clara sighed. It hurts, but I can shoot. That's what matters. Silas was quiet for a moment. Then, I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous. It's not, it's just, he struggled for words. If something happens tomorrow, if things go bad and I don't make it, stop. Clara, listen to me. No, she turned to face him. I'm not having this conversation. We're not saying goodbye. We're going up that trail together. We're taking down Blackwood together, and we're walking out of that canyon together. Anything else is unacceptable. You can't know that. I can believe it, and right now belief is all we've got. Silas reached out and cupped her face in his hand. His thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle despite the calluses. You know what I was thinking? He said softly. When Blackwood showed up at the ranch. What? I was thinking that I'd finally found something worth living for. After 3 years of just existing, going through the motions, I'd finally found a reason to wake up in the morning. His voice cracked. And then he threatened to take it away, just like before.
Clara leaned into his touch.
He's not going to take anything. Not this time.
How can you be so sure?
Because this time, you're not alone.
She covered his hand with hers.
This time, we fight together. And that makes all the difference.
They sat like that until Burke called for everyone to get some sleep. Tomorrow would come early, and it would demand everything they had. Clara lay on the hard ground, staring at the stars, Silas's warmth at her back. Sleep was a long time coming. Dawn broke gray and cold. The posse split into two groups. Burke took 8 men toward the canyon's main entrance, planning to make noise, draw attention, give Silas's group time to get into position. Silas led Clara and 4 others up the rim trail. The path was every bit as treacherous as he'd warned. Narrow, crumbling in places, with drops that made Clara's stomach lurch every time she looked down. One wrong step, and you'd fall 300 feet onto the rocks below.
Stay close to the wall, Silas whispered.
Test every foothold before you trust it. Clara kept her eyes fixed on his back and tried not to think about how high they were. An hour of careful climbing. 2 hours. Clara's legs burned, her arms screamed, her lungs ached from the thin air. Then Silas held up his fist. Stop! Clara froze. Behind her, the 4 deputies did the same. Silas crept forward, peering over a rocky outcrop. When he turned back, his face was tight. "We're above the camp," he breathed. "I count 16 men. Blackwood's in the largest shelter, near the back." "More than we expected." "Yeah," Silas's jaw tightened. "Must have called in reinforcements after we escaped." From below, Clara heard shouting. Burke's group had arrived at the canyon entrance, making themselves known. "That's our signal." Silas drew his rifle. "Spread out. Find cover. Wait for my first shot, then open fire." The next few minutes were a blur of movement and terror. Clara found a position behind a boulder, her rifle braced against the rock, her heart pounding so hard she could barely aim. Below, Blackwood's men were scrambling, taking positions to defend against Burke's assault. They had no idea death was coming from above. Silas's rifle cracked. A man dropped. Then everything exploded into chaos. Clara fired at movement, reloaded, fired again. The canyon filled with the thunder of gunshots, the screams of wounded men, the acrid smell of gunpowder. She saw one of Burke's deputies take a bullet, fall from his horse. Saw Blackwood's men scrambling for cover, confused by the attack from 2 directions. "There!" One of the men below pointed up at their position. "They're on the rim!" Bullets began pinging off the rocks around Clara. She ducked, heart racing, then popped back up to return fire. A man was climbing toward them, using the rocks for cover. Clara tracked him, waiting for a clear shot. Now! She squeezed the trigger. The man tumbled backward, disappearing over the edge. "Good shot!" Silas was beside her, reloading with practiced speed. "Keep it up!" The battle raged. Clara lost track of time, lost track of how many shots she'd fired, lost track of everything except the next target, the next breath, the next moment. Then she saw him. Ezra Blackwood, running toward the back of the canyon, heading for what looked like a narrow passage hidden in the rock face. "He's trying to escape!" Silas's head snapped around. His eyes found Blackwood, and Clara saw something dangerous ignite in their depths. "Cover me!" "Silas, wait!" But he was already moving, scrambling down the rocky slope toward the canyon floor. "Damn it!" Clara fired at a man who was aiming at Silas, watched him fall, then started after him. The descent was treacherous. Clara slipped twice, caught herself both times, her palms scraped raw against the stone. Below, the fighting was still fierce, but Burke's men were gaining ground. She hit the canyon floor and ran.
Silas was ahead of her, chasing Blackwood toward that hidden passage. Clara pushed herself faster, ignoring the fire in her lungs, the pain in her arm. "Silas!" He didn't slow down. Clara rounded a corner and found them. Silas had Blackwood at gunpoint. The outlaw's back was against the rock wall, his hands raised, that cultured smile still playing on his lips. "Well done, Mr. Morrow." Blackwood's voice was calm, almost admiring. "You've hunted me for years. Now here we are." "Here we are," Silas agreed. His gun hand was steady, but Clara could see the tension in every line of his body. "Going to shoot me? Avenge your family?" "I'm going to watch you hang. That's what you deserve. A proper trial and a rope." "How civilized." Blackwood's smile widened. "But we both know that's not what you really want." "Don't tell me what I want." "I know exactly what you want. You want to put a bullet in my brain. You want to watch the light leave my eyes. You want me to suffer the way they suffered." Blackwood took a step forward. "So do it. Pull the trigger. Prove you're just like me." "I'm nothing like you." "No?" Another step. "You've killed men. You've hunted them across the territory. You've done things that would make ordinary folks sick. The only difference between us is that I'm honest about what I am. The difference is, I never murdered children." Something flickered in Blackwood's expression. Just for a moment. "That was unfortunate," he said quietly. "I gave orders to send a message. Dutch interpreted those orders more literally than I intended." Silas's gun wavered. "What?" "I told him to scare you. Make you understand that your family wasn't safe as long as you kept coming after me. I didn't tell him to—" Blackwood stopped. "Not that it matters now." "You're lying." "Why would I lie? I'm a dead man either way." Blackwood spread his hands. "I'm many things, Mr. Morrow, but I'm not a fool. Killing children brings too much attention, too much heat. If I'd wanted your family dead, I would have done it myself, cleanly, quietly. What happened at your ranch was," he sighed, "messy." Clara watched Silas's face as he processed this, watched the confusion, the rage, the terrible uncertainty. "Dutch killed them," Silas whispered. "Not you." "Dutch killed them on my orders. The blood is still on my hands. I'm not trying to escape responsibility." Blackwood's voice hardened. "But if you're going to pull that trigger, at least do it with clear eyes. Know exactly who you're killing and why." Silas's finger tightened on the trigger. Clara stepped forward. "Silas." He didn't look at her. "Stay out of this." "I'm not staying out of anything." She moved closer, carefully. "Look at me. Clara, look at me." Slowly, Silas turned his head. His eyes were wet, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscles straining. "What do you see?" she asked softly. "What? When you look at him, what do you see?" Silas's gaze flickered to Blackwood, then back to her. "I see the man who destroyed my life." "And if you kill him right now, what will you see tomorrow?" Silence. "Hannah wouldn't want this." Clara's voice was gentle but firm. "Your children wouldn't want this. They'd want you to live, to be happy, to find peace. Can you find peace with his blood on your hands?" "He deserves to die." "Maybe he does, but you don't deserve to be the one who kills him." Clara reached out, slowly, and placed her hand over his on the gun. "Let the law handle this. Let justice take its course. Don't become what he says you are." Silas's hand trembled under hers. "Please," Clara whispered. "For them. For us."
Let it go.
A long, terrible moment stretched between them. Then Silas lowered his gun. Clara felt the tension drain from her body. Behind them, she heard footsteps. Burke and his men. The battle apparently over. "Marshal," Silas's voice was hoarse. "Your prisoner." Burke took in the scene with sharp eyes. Two of his deputies moved forward, binding Blackwood's hands. "Ezra Blackwood," Burke said formally. "You're under arrest for murder, robbery, and about 24 other charges. You'll stand trial in Austin." Blackwood looked at Silas one last time. "You're a better man than I gave you credit for, Morrow." Silas didn't respond. He turned and walked away, Clara at his side. Behind them, Blackwood's voice drifted through the canyon air. "Take care of him, Mrs. Whitfield. Men like him don't come along often." Clara didn't look back. They made camp that night in the canyon, tending wounds, counting losses. 2 of Burke's men dead, 4 wounded. All of Blackwood's gang either killed or captured. A victory by any measure. But Silas didn't look victorious. Clara found him sitting apart from the others, staring at nothing. "Hey!" He didn't respond. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Talk to me." "I wanted to kill him." Silas's voice was barely audible. Standing there, gun in my hand. I wanted it more than I've ever wanted anything. "But you didn't." "Only because you stopped me." "No," Clara shook her head. "You stopped yourself. I just reminded you who you are." "And who's that?" "A good man." She took his hand. "A man who chose justice over revenge. Who chose to honor his family's memory instead of staining it." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then, "He said Dutch killed them, not him." "Does it matter?" "I don't know. Maybe." Silas's jaw tightened. 3 years I've blamed Blackwood. 3 years I've imagined putting a bullet in him. And now, he shook his head. Dutch is dead, killed in the fighting. I can't even confront him about it. Would that have helped? Probably not. Silas laughed, but there was no humor in it. Nothing helps. Nothing brings them back. No, Clara squeezed his hand. But something can help you move forward. Something can help you build a new life instead of just mourning the old one. What's that? Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. Me, if you'll have me. Silas turned to look at her, something fragile and hopeful flickering in his eyes. Clara Whitfield, he said softly. Are you proposing? I'm offering, she smiled despite everything. What you do with that offer is up to you. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. I accept, he murmured against her lips. God help me, I accept. They sat together as the stars emerged, two wounded souls who'd found each other in the wreckage of their lives. Tomorrow they'd ride to Austin. Tomorrow, Blackwood would face trial. Tomorrow, the world would keep turning, with all its violence and injustice and pain. But tonight, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, honest hope. And that, she decided, was worth fighting for. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Clara and Silas stayed in Austin, renting rooms at a boarding house near the courthouse. Every day they sat in the gallery, watching as witness after witness testified to Ezra Blackwood's crimes. The prosecution was thorough. They brought in survivors of his robberies, families of his victims, former gang members who'd turned state's evidence in exchange for lighter sentences. And they brought in Silas. Clara watched him take the stand, watched him describe finding his home in ashes, his family's bodies barely recognizable. Watched him fight to keep his voice steady as he recounted the 3 years of grief and rage that followed. The jury listened in horrified silence. Blackwood, for his part, showed no emotion.
He sat at the defense table with his hands folded, watching the proceedings like they were happening to someone else. On the final day, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Clara grabbed Silas's hand as the judge called for order. Ezra Blackwood, you have been found guilty of murder in the first degree, armed robbery, arson, and conspiracy to commit murder. The judge's voice was cold as iron. You are hereby sentenced to death by hanging. May God have mercy on your soul. Blackwood stood, still calm, and turned to look at Silas one last time. Well played, Mr. Morrow. His voice carried across the courtroom. I suppose this makes us even. We'll never be even, Silas replied. But it's a start. They led Blackwood away in chains. Outside the courthouse, Clara and Silas stood in the afternoon sun, breathing free air. It's over, Clara said. Yeah. Silas's voice was strange, hollow. It's over.
How do you feel? He thought about it for a long moment.
Empty.
I thought I'd feel, I don't know, satisfied? Vindicated? But I just feel empty, Clara finished.
Yeah. She laced her fingers through his. That's because revenge doesn't fill you up. It just creates more space for grief. Then what does fill you up? Clara smiled. Living, building something new, finding reasons to wake up in the morning that aren't about death. Silas looked at her, really looked, and Clara saw something shift in his expression, the emptiness receding, something warmer taking its place. I have reasons, he said softly. I have you. You have me. Is that enough? Clara stretched up and kissed him, right there on the courthouse steps, not caring who saw. It's a start, she whispered. They stayed for the hanging. Clara hadn't wanted to, hadn't seen the point in watching a man die, even a man like Ezra Blackwood. But Silas needed to see it through, needed to watch the final chapter close with his own eyes. So she stood beside him in the crowd that gathered outside the Austin jailhouse, her hand tight in his, as they led Blackwood to the gallows. The outlaw walked with his head high, that cultured calm never wavering. He scanned the crowd until his eyes found Silas. Mr. Morrow, Blackwood's voice carried clearly. I trust you'll raise a glass to me tonight. Silas said nothing. They put the hood over Blackwood's head, adjusted the noose. The executioner reached for the lever. Clara felt Silas's hand tighten on hers. The trapdoor dropped. It was over in seconds. The crowd murmured, some cheering, some praying, most just watching in grim silence. Silas stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the body swinging from the rope. Silas? Clara touched his arm. Are you all right? He didn't answer for a long moment. Then, slowly, he turned away from the gallows. Let's go home. They rode back to the ranch in near silence. Clara watched Silas from the corner of her eye, trying to read his expression, trying to understand what was happening inside him. He seemed lighter, somehow, like a weight he'd been carrying for 3 years had finally been set down. But there was something else there, too, something uncertain. What are you thinking? She finally asked as they crested the last hill and the ranch came into view.
Silas pulled his horse to a stop, looking down at the property he'd built with his own hands. "I'm thinking about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "For 3 years, my whole life has been about one thing: finding Blackwood, making him pay." Silas's voice was quiet. "Now that's done, and I don't know who I am without it." Clara guided her horse closer to his. "You're the man who saved my life. You're the man who chose justice over revenge. You're the man who's going to build something new with me." She reached out and touched his face. "That's who you are." "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple, but it is possible." Clara smiled. "One day at a time. That's how we do this." Silas covered her hand with his. "One day at a time." They rode down to the ranch together. The first thing Clara noticed was the damage. While they'd been gone, someone had been there. Windows broken, the door kicked in. The word "murderer" painted across the front of the house in what looked like blood. Silas went rigid. "Garrett," Clara breathed. "It has to be." "Stay here." "Like hell." They dismounted together, rifles drawn, moving toward the house with cautious steps. Clara's heart pounded as they pushed through the ruined door. Inside was chaos, furniture overturned, dishes smashed. The photograph of Hannah and the children torn from the wall, the glass shattered, the image slashed through. Silas made a sound like he'd been punched in the gut. "No." He crossed to the ruined photograph, dropping to his knees, his hands hovering over the pieces like he was afraid to touch them. "No, no, no." Clara knelt beside him. "Silas." "It's the only picture I had." His voice cracked. "The only picture of them. And he... Clara wrapped her arms around him as he broke. She'd seen him angry. She'd seen him cold. She'd seen him fighting for his life with deadly calm. She'd never seen him cry. But now, kneeling in the wreckage of his home, holding the torn remnants of his family's image, Silas Morrow sobbed like a child. Clara held him through it. Didn't speak. Didn't try to offer comfort. Just held on and let him grieve. When the storm finally passed, Silas pulled back, wiping his face with shaking hands. "I'm going to kill him." "No. Clara, look at this." His voice was raw. "Look at what he did. Not to me. To them. To their memory. And if you kill him, you'll hang. Or you'll spend the rest of your life running." Clara gripped his shoulders. "Is that what you want? After everything we've been through? You want to throw it all away for Garrett Hollis?" "He can't get away with this." "He won't." Clara's voice hardened. "But we do this the right way. We go to Marshal Burke. We file charges. We let the law handle it." "The law didn't help you in Dusty Hollow." "That was a different law. Different men." Clara forced him to meet her eyes. "Burke is a good man. He'll listen. He'll act. Give him a chance." Silas stared at her, the rage and grief warring in his expression. "Please," Clara whispered. "For me. For us. Don't become what they want you to be." A long, terrible moment passed. Then Silas's shoulders sagged. "All right. We'll try it your way." His jaw tightened. "But if Burke can't help..." "Then we'll figure something else out. Together." Silas nodded slowly. Together. They spent the night cleaning up the wreckage. Clara worked in silence, righting furniture, sweeping broken glass, scrubbing the hateful word from the wall. Silas moved like a ghost, mechanical, his eyes hollow. When they finally collapsed into bed, exhausted and heartsick, Clara pulled him close and held on tight. "We'll rebuild," she whispered. "Whatever they broke, we'll fix. Whatever they destroyed, we'll make new." Some things can't be fixed. Silas's voice was muffled against her shoulder. Some things are just gone.
The photograph is gone, but the memories aren't.
Clara stroked his hair.
Hannah isn't in that picture. She's in your heart. Daniel and Lily aren't in that image. They're in every story you tell, every time you smile at something they would have loved.
You didn't know them.
I know you, and you carry them with you every day.
Clara pressed a kiss to his forehead.
That's not something anyone can destroy.
Silas was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, his arms tightened around her.
How do you always know the right thing to say?
I don't. I just say what I feel and hope it helps.
It helps.
Silas lifted his head to look at her. You help. More than you know. He kissed her then, soft and tender, and Clara felt some of the tension drain from his body.
Get some sleep, she murmured. Tomorrow we ride to Red Mesa.
And then?
And then we see what Marshal Burke can do.
They set out at first light. The ride to Red Mesa took most of the day, and Clara spent it rehearsing what she would say. How she would explain everything Garrett Hollis had done, from the beating in Dusty Hollow to the destruction of the ranch. But when they finally reached the marshal's office, Burke wasn't there. "Rode out this morning," his deputy said, a young man with nervous eyes. "Got word of trouble over in Cedar Creek. Won't be back for a week at least." Clara's heart sank. "Can you help us?" Silas asked. "Depends on what you need." They explained. The deputy listened, his expression growing increasingly uncomfortable. "That's Dusty Hollow business," he said when they finished. "Out of our jurisdiction. Marshal Burke isn't here, and I can't ride into another town's territory based on vandalism charges." The deputy spread his hands apologetically. "I'm sorry, truly, but my hands are tied." Clara felt Silas's rage building beside her. She grabbed his arm before he could say something they both regret.
"Thank you for your time,"
she said tightly, steering Silas toward the door. Outside, Silas rounded on her. "Now what?"
"I don't know."
Clara's mind raced.
"We could wait for Burke."
"A week? We wait a week while Garrett plans his next attack?"
"Then we go back to the ranch and defend it ourselves."
"Against how many men? We don't even know—"
"Mr. Morrow?"
They both turned. A woman stood behind them, middle-aged, well-dressed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Do I know you?" Silas asked warily. "No, but I know you. Know your story, anyway." The woman stepped closer. "My name is Margaret Ellis. I own the Red Mesa Gazette, and I think I might be able to help you." Clara and Silas exchanged looks.
"How?" Clara asked.
Margaret smiled. "Come with me. Let's talk." They followed her to the newspaper office, a small building packed with printing equipment and stacks of paper. Margaret poured them coffee and settled behind her desk. "I've been following the Blackwood case," she began. "Covered the trial, the hanging. Quite a story." "What does that have to do with Garrett Hollis?" Silas asked. "Nothing directly, but it does have to do with you." Margaret leaned forward. "You're a hero, Mr. Morrow. The man who finally brought down Ezra Blackwood. People know your name now. They respect you." "I'm no hero." "That's not what the papers say." Margaret pulled out a stack of clippings. "Look at these. Former ranger captures notorious outlaw. Justice for Blackwood's victims. The man who never gave up." Clara took the clippings, scanning them with growing surprise. She hadn't realized how much attention the trial had attracted. "What's your point?" Silas asked. "My point is that men like Garrett Hollis thrive in the shadows. They count on silence, on fear, on people being too scared to speak up." Margaret's eyes glittered. "But sunlight is the best disinfectant. If the whole territory knew what he did to Mrs. Whitfield, what he did to your ranch, do you think he could get away with it?" You want to write about us?
I want to tell the truth. About what happened in Dusty Hollow. About the sheriff who looked the other way. About the good people who watched a woman get beaten and did nothing.
Margaret's voice hardened.
I want to shine a light so bright that Garrett Hollis can't hide anymore.
Clara looked at Silas. He looked back, uncertainty in his eyes.
It would make us targets, Clara said slowly. More than we already are.
You're already targets, Margaret's voice softened. But right now you're isolated, alone. If I publish this story, you won't be alone anymore. People will know. People will care. And people with power, real power, will have to act.
Silas was silent for a long moment. Then, what do you need from us?
Your story. All of it. From the beginning.
Clara took a deep breath.
Where do you want me to start?
At the beginning, Mrs. Whitfield. Start at the beginning. So Clara told her story. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like water breaking through a dam. She told Margaret about Dusty Hollow, about the beating, about lying in the dirt while good people turned away. She told her about Silas, about the ranch, about falling in love despite everything. Silas added his piece, too. His history with Blackwood, his family, the 3 years of grief that had almost destroyed him. Margaret wrote it all down, asking questions, clarifying details, her pen never stopping. When they finally finished, the sun was setting outside the window. "This is going to cause a firestorm," Margaret said quietly. "You understand that?" "Yes. There will be people who blame you, who call you liars, who try to destroy your reputation." "Let them try." Clara's voice was steady. "The truth is on our side." Margaret nodded slowly. "I'll have the story ready in 2 days. It'll run in the Red Mesa Gazette first, but I have contacts at papers in Austin, San Antonio, even Houston." She smiled grimly. "By the end of the week, everyone in Texas will know Garrett Hollis's name." They returned to the ranch that night, exhausted but hopeful. For the first time since finding the damage, Clara felt like they had a chance. Not just to survive, but to win. "What do we do now?" she asked as they unsaddled the horses. "We wait." Silas's voice was grim. "And we prepare. If Garrett hears about the story before it publishes, he'll come for us." Yeah. They spent the next 2 days fortifying the ranch. Silas reinforced the doors, boarded the broken windows, set up defensive positions. Clara practiced her shooting, loaded extra ammunition, prepared for whatever might come. On the 3rd morning, they heard hoofbeats. Clara grabbed her rifle. Silas was already at the door. But it wasn't Garrett Hollis riding toward them. It was Marshal Burke. "Heard you were looking for me," Burke said as he dismounted. "Also heard about what happened here." His eyes swept over the damaged house, the patched windows. "Looks like you've had some trouble." "That's one word for it." "I talked to Margaret Ellis this morning. Read her story." Burke's expression was unreadable. "It's going to print today." Clara's heart leaped. "Already?" "She moved fast. Said she wanted to get ahead of any attempts to suppress it." Burke turned to Silas. "She also told me about Garrett Hollis, what he did to Mrs. Whitfield, what he did here, and I've already sent deputies to Dusty Hollow. Garrett Hollis is being arrested as we speak." Clara felt her knees go weak. "What?" "The story changes things. Before, it was your word against his. Now, it's going to be front-page news across the territory." Burke's jaw tightened. "I've also sent word to the territorial governor. Sheriff Wade is going to have some questions to answer about why he didn't act." Silas stared at the marshal. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Burke extended his hand.
I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner, but I'm here now, and I intend to see this through." Silas shook his hand, something like wonder crossing his face. "Thank you," Clara breathed. "Thank you so much."
"Don't thank me yet. Garrett Hollis has friends. This isn't over." Burke mounted his horse. "But it's a start." He rode away, leaving Clara and Silas standing in stunned silence.
"Did that just happen?"
Clara whispered. "I think it did." They looked at each other, and then, simultaneously, they started to laugh. It was hysterical laughter, the kind that came after too much tension, too much fear, too much grief. They laughed until they cried, holding onto each other for support.
"We did it!"
Clara gasped.
"We actually did it!"
"You did it," Silas pulled back to look at her. "Your story, your courage. You're the one who changed everything."
"We did it together."
"Yeah." He smiled, really smiled, and Clara felt her heart swell. Together. The story ran the next day. Margaret Ellis had done her work well. The article was detailed, devastating, and impossible to ignore. It named names: Garrett Hollis, his friends, Sheriff Wade, the people of Dusty Hollow who had watched and done nothing. The response was immediate. Letters poured into the Red Mesa Gazette. Some supportive, some hostile, but all engaged. People were talking. People were outraged. People were demanding justice. Garrett Hollis was transferred to Austin to await trial. Sheriff Wade was suspended pending investigation. Horace Hollis, Garrett's father, lost half his business as customers took their trade elsewhere. And in Dusty Hollow, for the first time in years, people started asking questions. Mrs. Patterson sent a letter to Clara, apologizing for not helping that day, for letting fear keep her silent. Tom Wheeler showed up at the ranch with a load of lumber and an offer to help rebuild. "Not everyone looked away because they wanted to," he said, unable to meet Clara's eyes. "Some of us were just scared." "I know," Clara said. "I was scared too." "Can you forgive us?" Clara looked at the man, at his weathered face and his shame-filled eyes. She thought about the rage she'd carried, the bitterness, the sense of betrayal. And she made a choice. "Forgiveness takes time," she said honestly. "But this is a good start." Summer turned to fall. The ranch slowly transformed from a place of ghosts to a place of life. Silas smiled more, laughed more, slept through the night without waking in cold sweats. Clara planted the garden, adopted a half-wild cat that wandered in from the prairie, started talking about the future like it was something real instead of just a dream. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Clara's breath caught. "I've been carrying this around for a week," Silas said, his voice rough. "Trying to find the right moment, the right words." He laughed softly. "Turns out there are no right words. There's just this." He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band. Nothing fancy, but it caught the fading light like a promise. Clara Whitfield. Silas looked at her, all his love and hope and fear naked in his eyes. "You saved my life. Not just that day on the trail, but every day since. You taught me how to live again, how to hope again, how to love again." Clara felt tears streaming down her face. "I know I'm not an easy man. I know I've got ghosts. I know there are days when the darkness gets too close." Silas's voice cracked. "But I also know that with you beside me, I can face anything. So I'm asking, Clara, will you stand with me? Not just for now, but for always?" Clara couldn't speak, could barely breathe.
So she did the only thing she could do. She kissed him. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes."
Silas slipped the ring onto her finger, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. Something that had been broken for so long, she'd forgotten it could be whole.
"I love you," she said.
"I love you too." Silas pulled her close. More than I ever thought I could love anyone again. They were married a month later in the little church in Red Mesa. Marshall Burke attended. Margaret Ellis wrote a small piece about it. A happy ending to the story that had captured the territory's attention. Even Doc Price and his wife made the journey from Dusty Hollow. Clara wore a simple white dress. Silas wore his best clothes and a smile that transformed his face. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Clara felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Pure, uncomplicated joy. That night, lying in their bed in their home, Clara traced patterns on Silas's chest. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about that day in Dusty Hollow, when I was lying in the dirt, wishing I could die." Silas's arm tightened around her. "Clara." "I'm not sad," she looked up at him. "I'm grateful. Because if that hadn't happened, I never would have found you. Never would have had this life." She smiled. "Every terrible thing that happened led me here. To this moment. To you." "You don't regret any of it?" "I regret the pain. I regret the fear. But I don't regret where it brought me." Clara pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "Do you?" Silas was quiet for a moment. Then, "I used to think my life ended when Hannah and the children died. I used to think I was just going through the motions, waiting to join them. And now? Now I think maybe there was a reason I survived. Maybe there was something I was supposed to find." His voice softened. "Someone I was supposed to love." "Hannah would be happy for you." "I think she would." Silas kissed Clara's forehead. "I think she'd like you." "I hope so." They lay in comfortable silence, listening to the wind outside, the settling of the house, the thousand small sounds of a life being lived. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "Now," Silas smiled. "Now we live. We build. We grow old together and tell stories to our grandchildren about the summer everything changed." "Grandchildren?" "If we're lucky." Clara laughed. "Let's start with getting through the winter first." "Deal." Outside, the Texas sky stretched endless and star-filled. Inside, two people who had been broken, who had been beaten down, who had survived things that should have destroyed them, held each other in the darkness. They had been through fire. They had been through blood. They had faced their worst fears and come out the other side. And now, finally, they were home. Clara Whitfield Morrow had fallen in the dust of a cruel town's street, abandoned by everyone she'd thought would help her. But she had risen. She had risen with the help of a man who'd pulled her from the dirt and whispered a promise. "You'll stand with me." And she had, through gunfire and grief, through loss and hope, through all the darkness that life could throw at them, she had stood. And she would keep standing, now and forever, because that was who Clara Whitfield Morrow had become. Not a victim, not a survivor. A woman who had been broken and had rebuilt herself, stronger than before. A woman who had found love in the wreckage of her life. A woman who would never fall again.